All right. That music kind of sounds like the walking in part of a wedding a little bit, kind of the organ sound. And then good morning, everybody. Welcome to At Home Songwriting, a live stream today. So we're going to do a songwriter chat. I'm Chad Shank with At Home Songwriting. For those of you who may be new to watching the channel, watching the live streams, we say hello to everyone on YouTube and on Facebook as well. We're going to have a special guest with us this morning. And also, just to let you know, you can ask questions and join the conversation in the comments and in the chat section. So if you have anything that you want to ask me, if you want to ask our special guest, definitely put it in the chat. There's a little bit of a delay, so it might take a little bit before we get to your question, but we'll definitely take a look at it. So welcome to the Songwriter Chat this morning. I'm excited to have another at-home songwriter, a friend of mine from another community here in Minnesota, joining and really just to talk about his music and talk about songwriting in general. So welcome everybody, Paul Beckermann. Paul, welcome to At Home Songwriting.
Hey, Chad, glad to be here.
Yes, you are kind of my first fully live guest. So you have the honor of being here. So welcome.
That's awesome. I'm glad to be considered fully alive. I appreciate that.
There you go. Awesome. Well, as I said, you and we've known each other for a few years now. I think it's
Mhm.
been pre-pandemic. I think we met. So
Yeah, we met at some songwriting workshops that you were leading, actually, Chad, for Minnesota Association of Songwriters in the Twin Cities here, and kind of stayed connected since then, virtually and sometimes in person.
yeah, I think the first time we met was when someone we both know actually had a workshop at her house, and there were like snacks and stuff, and we did a workshop in her living room, which I hear people doing home concerts. I think we should start a thing of home songwriting workshops. I think that would be a thing. I mean, I'll go anywhere there's food, and if you pay for my gas or flight, just saying.
Exactly. Then you can have the food and the beverage of your choice.
Yeah. So Paul, you're a songwriter, a musician. We'll talk more about kind of your music that you're working on most recently. Um, but we've known each other for a while, but I've never really asked you how you got started in music. Like, let's rewind it and go back to what did that look like for you? How did music and songwriting come into your life?
I probably started songwriting when I was in college, but I've been interested in music my whole life. My parents got me into band. I played my tenor saxophone. They got me into piano lessons. Did all that stuff through high school, and then in college, just kind of started to do some writing. Some friends of mine in the dorms and that, and it probably stemmed out of my literature background. I'm a former English teacher, creative writing teacher. So it probably started with the words, even though I loved the music, and I tried to put the two together. And then after college, got to my school district where I was teaching, and we put on some fundraisers, and they came and said, Paul, you need to put something together for the kids, something the kids are going to like. So we made a little spoof of a heavy metal band and started writing some songs that just were kind of parodies, and it led to actually some full-time gigging and some stuff that became more, not full-time, but more serious gigging, paid gigs and stuff like that over the years.
So when you were growing up, were you into like listening to music, and like was music a thing for you when you were younger, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I would. I was kind of a geek about it. I would listen to Casey Kasem, on the American Top 40, and I would
Yeah.
write down the top 10 every week, and then
Awesome.
kind of keep track of how the music would go from week to week. And then the M&M company, Mars Company, had a thing going on where if you sent in 15 rappers, they would send you a 45 single of whatever song in the top 10 you wanted. So I was like, sweet, I get free music. So I would just be going down to the park after the ball games and collecting rappers and stocking up my pile of 45s, and just every chance I could get to get some music, I would do it.
That's awesome. Who were your favorites back then?
My first LP I ever bought was ELO's Greatest Hits. But I
Cool.
kind of grew up on Springsteen and Mellencamp and Tom Petty, and kind of that genre was really where I was. Styx, Def Leppard, you
Nice.
80s stuff, whatever was hot in the 80s, but I was kind of into the more of the singer-songwriter, the people who had a little bit more introspective or meaningful lyrics.
When did you start playing an instrument? When did that become a thing for you?
It probably started with band, in fourth grade, playing tenor saxophone, and then um, piano in middle school. But where it really took off for me is I took a class when I was in high school called advanced music. And one of
Mm.
the requirements of the advanced music class was we had to learn an instrument that we had never played before or didn't know how to play. So I went to the local music teacher and I rented a Stratocaster for $5 a month, and I learned how to
Wow.
play guitar in that class. And my brother was in there and a couple friends. We kind of formed a little band inside of there and wrote some original music. That was another requirement. We had to write an original song. So that was kind of where I got my start on the songwriting bit and the guitar playing.
That's awesome. I was just thinking the other day that, one of my first I mean, I started playing music probably in, like, 3rd grade when my parents bought me a keyboard, and I'm pretty much self-taught, but in high school, I took a music theory class, and not many high schools offer music theory, but
No,
ours did, and I was, like, not a band kid. I can't read music, like, there's all these things, but I learned so much of music theory in that class, and I'm like, more schools need to do the things like what you said your school did where, get the kids playing an instrument they don't play or, like, teach them that stuff. I think that's awesome.
I love that you had that opportunity because you are right. That is a really rare thing to have a music theory class. Now I suppose there's more things like your at-home songwriting network and there's online classes and things like that where kids have a little more access today. But there's something about being in a community of learners in a classroom where you can really work together and develop that skill. That's really cool that you had that experience.
Yeah, and honestly, like, it was one of those things where you had to, like, look ahead and pick what classes you were taking, like, next semester or next year or whatever, and I just saw, "Oh, it's music," and music theory, I'm like, "It's probably, like, music history or something, I don't know, I'll take it because it sounds cool," and it's like, "Oh, this is neat." So, yeah, it was perfect.
That exposure is everything. And my wife and I were just talking about, how you pick your career. You don't really know what you don't know unless you have
Yeah.
some kind of a door to open into a new experience. You don't even know that that's a choice for you and a place to pursue. So I concur, have those experiences and have those opportunities.
Um, so obviously you started playing guitar kind of on a dare from a teacher, right? Like they kind of said, "Hey, go out and play something that you've never played before." So did you find that like once you picked up the Stratocaster, which $5 a month, like that sounds like an awesome deal right
It
now,
was.
doesn't it? Like that sounds like a good deal. Like what did you feel when like you started doing that?
I love being creative, and it just was a whole nother way to express myself and to bring my love of music together with my love of creating. And then even the collaboration piece, my brother decided he was going to learn bass, and then his friend was going to learn keyboard, and his other friend was going to learn drums. So the way that we could kind of collaborate together and taking listening music kind of to the next step of creating music, which was
Mm,
really a game changer for me.
cool. What was your band name?
We didn't have one. We should have had one, right? We were just four
Yeah.
kids in advanced music.
I thought you were gonna say like Shag Carpet or something was gonna be your band name.
No, but remember I said that we had to put something together to appeal to the kids and do for this fundraiser. We were
Yeah,
toxic waste.
sweet.
It was kind of like rancid, or something. We had to pick something really kind of on the edge.
This is not funny because the situation's not funny, but, the train derailment in Ohio, like, Toxic Train Derailment sounds like an '80s band. Like, the other day, I was
Mhm.
like, "That's an '80s band name right there, Toxic Train Derailment."
And ironically that you say that, I mean, it's a very sad story with the derailment, but we had the strobe lights going and the the whatever. And then I did this little narration of a train derailment, and that's how Toxic Waste Band escaped into the world.
Hey, if it works, right? You
That's
know?
right.
So, did you then pursue I mean, I know that you studied, like you said, literature and writing and all of those things. Like, was music kind of always there underneath of all that other study throughout your life? Or what was that evolution as you went on to college and all of that?
I didn't do much formally in college. We had J term, so you had to take a exploratory class during January for a month. And I did take a jazz improvisation class, but that was with saxophone. But it did teach
Cool.
me kind of how to improvise and do some of that stuff. But really, it was more my own desire to do it. And honestly, when I started teaching, I probably, other than our little toxic waste gig and stuff, for maybe 5 years, I didn't do much with music. I was so busy just learning how to survive as a teacher. It just
Yeah.
got put in the back closet for a while.
Yeah. I think that's okay though. A lot of people, even some watching, might be in that situation too, where like life sometimes gets in the way of like some of the creative pursuits. But I think that's part of the for me, I think it's part of the cycle, right? Because I've had times in my life where I don't touch music for even like 6 months at a time sometimes, where it's like I just don't either feel like it or life gets weird, those types of things. But I think when you come back to it, it's almost like you're refreshed and so I don't think people should feel bad about that stuff.
I totally agree. I mean, it's kind of like when you're writing a lot of songs, you're sort of emptying the vessel of all your ideas for a while, and then you got to live life
Yeah.
for a little bit and fill it back up. And you look at some of the famous composers and artists; they've almost all gone through, you know, points where they didn't be as productive as they had been previously. That's just a natural course of action. I think that's fine.
Um so now recently, obviously, I know that you've been writing songs. You have a group called the Sun Dogs.
Mhm.
So tell us about what you've been kind of working on with the Sun Dogs and on your own as well.
So the Sun Dogs is a massive group of two people. It's my friend Scott Lemke and I, and we've been writing acoustic things. And we were both here in the same community at first when we met about 7 years ago. And I see Chad put a little QR down there to the Sun Dogs website. Thanks,
Yeah, if
Chad.
you want to check out their website, just take a picture of that little thing.
So we decided let's get back into it. Scott was big into music in college and hadn't done much with it since then, and my kids had graduated from school, and it was like I had some time, and let's do this. And so we started writing, and we had both written stuff that had just been sitting there and we hadn't done anything with. So we kind of came together and released an album of original music, about 17, 16 songs maybe. Some of that was done collaboratively. Well, it was all done collaboratively to some degree. Um, Most of them were initially penned by one of us, and then the other kind of added on to that a little bit. And then for the
Cool.
next two CDs, Scott actually took a job in another community. So we did everything long distance. And even on the
Oh,
first one, we'd be emailing tracks back and forth to each other and adding on ideas and sending it back. And then that person would add things on and send it back. So it was all done sort of virtually, which is a really kind of different way to approach songwriting, I guess.
awesome. So if anybody has any questions for Paul as well, put them in the chat. We can talk about that. So I'm curious about this long distance kind of like you said, you're collaborating, but you are maybe both of you working independently, but you're sending things back and forth. Like, do you ever get together and work on stuff then once it gets to a certain point, or what does that process look like for you guys?
It kind of changes depending on where we're at. We live about 2 hours away from each other right now, so it's
Hmm.
the composition piece is nearly all separate. On the first CD, first album, there were times where Scott would send me music and it had no lyrics. So then I would like top line on that and write some lyrics and send it back. And he said, "Oh, I like this concept. can I change this part? And I said, yeah, change whatever, let's make it something that's ours. And then he would change a little bit, or maybe I would write some lyrics to get it started. And then he would end up choosing to take lead vocals on that one. So then he would change the phrasing a little bit, or he would take words out so that it worked with rhythmically how he wanted to sing it. Um, Almost on every song, we'll send the core recording to each other, and then the other will add harmony.
Cool.
So we almost always do that way, where we send the bass part of it, or Scott will send me just an acoustic guitar with his lead vocals, and then I'll add some drums and bass and some harmony. Um, Kind of
So
depends on how full fleshed out the song is when we first get it from each other.
are you both kind of trading off lead vocals then on the projects?
Pretty much 50-50, I would say, at this point.
Cool. Um, do you consider yourself like, I guess maybe it's not a consider yourself, but what part of songwriting do you feel like you're the best at? Like, are you a certain type of songwriter? Like, are you a lyric person? Are you a music person? Like, what do you consider yourself to be?
Well, first of all, I would say that I live in beta. I'm always trying to get better at everything that I do, and I don't consider myself ever complete. Like I'm never there. I'm
Cool.
always trying to get there. Um, I probably start as a lyricist simply because my poetry background, my literature background, um, but I have played in bands and stuff for 30 years. So um, I I have enough foundation there, but I always feel like I want to learn new musical things more than I need to learn new lyrical things, just to try to stretch myself, I guess.
Interesting. What impact do you think your literature and poetry background has had on your songwriting?
I think it's given me the foundational elements, of any good literature, whether that's songwriting, poetry, short stories, novels, whatever. Your descriptive language, your sensory detail, your figurative language, rhythm and rhyme comes fairly naturally to me because of all the things that I've read over the years. The more you consume, the more reference points you have to kind of draw upon, and that can influence your writing moving forward.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest difference between poetry and lyrics?
That's a great question. I think there's a little bit more freedom in poetry maybe than songwriting, in the sense that the rhythmic structure of songs does bring you back into a little bit more structure and a little bit more format, where you have to sing it, and it has to be catchy, and there's generally some motifs that repeat themselves, where as a lot of poetry, especially if it's free verse that doesn't rhyme at all, there's less of that.
Mhm.
So it's kind of interesting, because when I was really deep into my poetry writing and sending poetry all across the country to try to get published and such, um, I don't think I ever wrote a poem that rhymed. It was like, if
Interesting.
if your poems rhyme, it sounds like old school and a little trite. But in songwriting, that's not the case. It's a different kind of thing. So I had to retrain myself in some ways to let go of some of those restrictions that I had in poetry writing, and embrace different sort of restrictions that I had in songwriting. So
Um, and actually, I mean, with songwriting too, rhyme is like one tool in in the
mhm,
toolbox, right? Like,
right.
you can overuse rhyme or incorrectly use rhyme too. So like, um, for me, I think that and I just posted this on Facebook, which is perfect timing. I was thinking in the shower this morning, like, don't like sacrifice a good line because you can't find a rhyme, right?
Yep.
Like, the content of the line is more important than the finding whatever that rhyme is. So looks like we
Yeah.
have a comment in the chat. So Jeanette says, what tools or programs do you use to record and save once you create your songs? So that's going kind of down your production process a little bit.
Yep.
So what does that look like for you, Paul?
Currently, I'm a Pro Tools user, so I have a PC, and I use Pro Tools, and then I have a bunch of plugins that I put into that. But I know there's lots of different programs out there, but Pro Tools is what I've sort of developed my routine around.
Do you use that too just for capturing, like, little ideas and things? Like, do you find yourself going to your computer, um, within that process? Like, I know sometimes I'll capture stuff on my phone and then I'll record it later. Like, are you doing that too, or what does that look like?
Yeah, for those initial ideas, I'd use my phone almost exclusively. I have a little text document where I put titles or little lyric ideas that I come up with, and then I also use the voice recorder just to hum a melody or sing like a few lines, because I know if I don't capture it right now, I will not remember it.
No, and that is probably, like, the biggest, like, songwriting advice that we can give you is do not believe yourself that you say that you're gonna remember it, because you will
No.
not remember it no matter how good you think it is, because I have told myself, like, "Oh, that's so good, there's no way I'm not gonna remember that." I don't remember it. So,
In
yeah.
fact, even when you've written a song, so if I'll sit down with my guitar and write a song, if I don't record my scratch copy on my phone, I won't remember it enough to record it full, full production later. It's like I just wrote and recorded that for a whole day, and now a week later I can't remember how it goes.
Same. Or if I'm trying to play, an instrument part, like if I'm playing on the
Yeah.
keyboard, um, and I'll just find the perfect groove, and it's like, "That's it," and then I can't do it again. Like, and I didn't record it, so I don't know what it was. Yeah. We have another question in the chat, which I love here. So Sophie Green Music says, "What helps you stay motivated to write lyrics?"
That's a great question, because sometimes you can kind of feel like your ideas dry up. It's like, I want to write something today, but I don't know what to write about, So, one thing that I've actually started doing since I've started collaborating more with Chad and joining some of his workshops is I've really started keeping a list of potential titles. I didn't used to do that,
Hmm.
but now I have, dozens of them on my phone. So if I really get stuck, I can go back to those, and it'll prompt an idea that maybe I'd forgotten about, or at least it'll give me something to get started. Um, or it's maybe a metaphor that I'll think about, or a life experience. I really believe that the most powerful songs can come from a life experience that has some sort of an emotional impact on you. So living life is probably the best source of lyrics. But then to capture those when you have that feeling and you have that inspiration, because they can be fleeting, like we said.
So for you personally, Paul, are you then, like, when you said, like you'll write a metaphor, you'll come up with a metaphor, are you then able to are you at the point where you can develop that and you're not stuck waiting for inspiration all the time? Like,
Hmm.
do you feel pretty good with your craft at this point?
Yeah. So here, everybody has their strengths. I think
Yeah.
one of the gifts that I'm grateful for is that I feel like I can brainstorm. I can open my mind and just let things spill out, even though if I may not know what it means yet.
Mhm.
I try to release my right brain, I guess, when I'm starting to write. So I will just put down ideas as fast as I possibly can. They don't have to make sense. I just want to let these connections that the right brain makes, that you often don't even know they're coming until they happen. It's like you need to surprise yourself in some ways and let the brain make a connection, like, oh, wow, how did I connect those two ideas? And you just write things down as fast as you can. And then once you have that big dump of ideas, now you can sort through and pull the treasures out of the trash.
So your songwriting advice is take a big dump.
You can say it that way if you
Okay. Okay.
That's hilarious.
Um, I think there's so much truth to that though, because e there is a different mindset of when you start to, like, edit and when you start
Mhm.
to, like, judge what you've written, and I think the second you invite that judging part, for me anyway, that's when it starts to shut down, because then I start thinking, "Well, that's not good. People aren't gonna wanna hear that," or,
Mhm.
all of that stuff.
Well, and I'm the first to admit I've written some really bad songs along with some that I'm really pleased with. They're not all going to be masterpieces, but you have to start too. If you're not sure where it's going, you can't let that stop you from the process, because if you never start, I guarantee you will never finish. You've got to get something going. And that's why, like, lately, I've been writing more songs that I haven't fully produced, which
Yeah.
hasn't been the case in the past. I used to always start a song and I take it all the way through production and finish it. Um, and I
Yeah.
thought, well, let's just write. I'm going to try to write more songs, like through some of these songwriting challenges, sort of like what you are um, facilitating through at home songwriting, and see
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
comes out. And then maybe pick and choose and cherry pick the best ones from those to fully produce. So that's a new approach that I'm trying.
That's an interesting point because that's what I've tried to do a little bit more of this year for myself as well. Because since I'm a producer and I can record all of my stuff, like a lot of times I'm like what you said, where I will take it all the way through recording, mixing, like mastering, like all the way till it's a song that I could maybe release. But I've been trying to write more just simply and then trying to figure out like which ones are actually worth taking it through the whole process. But I think taking it through the whole process is good practice too. So not saying that, production is not good when you're a songwriter, because I think in today's day and age, technology has mixed everything together. Everybody has some way of capturing an idea, whether that's on a phone or their DAW or something.
I agree. And it's hard not to take a song all the way through, because they're like our children. It's like you
Yeah.
love all your children. And there's something about every song that I like. I don't always like the whole song, but there's something about every song that I really like. And I always learn something from every new song that I write. So it's hard not to finish it, and take it all the way to the end.
So you said something, you said ever since you started kind of coming to some of my workshops, you said you've been writing down titles and stuff more. So was that a new concept that I kind of introduced to you, is kind of writing from a title, or was that,
Um,
what was
I
that
think
evolution?
I think I had heard of it before, but I never did it.
Got
It's
it.
always kind of one of those things. I suppose. But the more that I kind of worked with you, Chad, and followed some of your work, I've seen more how that can actually motivate me. Like somebody said, what helps you stay motivated to write lyrics? It's really filled in those dry spells, and it's always given me a way to prime that writing pump when I needed it.
Yeah. Yeah, titles are so powerful because they give you almost that guiding light. Like
Hmm.
a good title will spark ideas, and it'll kind of be that story starter right from the beginning. And it gives you, and the easiest way to write a chorus is to just repeat the title, right? Just repeat your
Right.
title 4 times and there's your chorus. You're done. Um, but the
It probably
verses have to.
started. Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh
Chad.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say it probably started. I probably started using it more so after that first workshop that we had in our friend's living room, where
Yeah.
you kind of led us through some of that title prompt or topic prompt, word prompt sort of writing, and just kind of letting us brainstorm off a focused point like that.
Yeah. And for those of you who are watching too, if you want to join some of the free workshops that I do online, you can join the meetup. There's athomesongwritingcourses.com. There's a link on the top of the screen where you can click on the meetup page, and then also the meetup is this long little link right here. So it's meetup.com/at-home-songwriting-workshops. There's some rhythm there too.
Is that a title for a prompt, Chad?
It could be. It could be. Somebody could write that.
You'd have to use
um,
some masterful melody writing along with it.
so are you writing songs? I mean, obviously we talked about like Sundog, so I know you're putting out music, you guys are doing gigs, you're getting out performing. Are you writing to, like, just for fun at this point? Or are you writing for to release them? Like, kind of what's your goal with some of the stuff that you're writing lately?
Um, so I'm going to date myself because nobody really listens to CDs anymore, right? But these are the ones that I've done. Um, so three of those are Sundogs, and two of them are from bands that I was in, and then the rest are solo projects. I
Cool.
just love the process of writing songs, putting them together into an album, and releasing that. I also love to play them live. I do lots of open mics where I play. In fact, there's one tonight that I'm going to go play at. And I love rolling out my original songs to a live audience to see how they respond to that. There's something
Yeah.
in that communication that you can have with a live audience that's pretty cool.
What's interesting about that is, don't you think when you're performing, there's a, like, kind of a nonverbal thing? Like,
Mhm.
you can tell when a song has somebody, even if they don't say anything. I know we do online reviews and stuff where people give you, like, more, like, focused feedback, but there's no, like you said, there's nothing like a live audience to actually see the nonverbals, right?
That's kind of my litmus test if I've written a good song or not. I really know when I go out and perform it, and if somebody does respond to it. And it seems like the same ones connect with people no matter where I play them. So that tells me,
Mhm.
oh, I think I did something with that one. You know,
Do the songs that you like yourself, are they the same as the ones that connect with audiences, or is there a disconnect?
I think many times that is the case. And I've been thinking about this. Are my better songs the ones that come sort of in one fluid moment, or are they the ones that I've had to labor over, over time?
Mm.
Because they're definitely both. And it almost feels like the ones that just pour out in a moment are the ones that are hitting better with the audience. And I don't know if that's because they have a more of an emotional punch to them because they had for me when I was inspired to write them, or if because they came out fairly quickly, they're more focused, perhaps too.
Yeah.
It's still
So
a mystery.
I saw an interview with John Mayer about this, and he said the songs that just come to him and he thinks, "Oh, well, that's just kind of a throwaway song." Those
Hmm.
are the ones that people, like, go crazy for, and then the ones that he, like, labors over and worries about the exact, like, everything, like, they're technically really good, and to
Yeah.
him, it's like, that is great work, but then everybody else is like, "Meh." So I don't know. I mean, I think that's why it's there's a little bit of science to what we do, but it's still like 98% art, right? Like, it's just,
Hmm.
if it works, it's good. Jeanette has
Yeah.
another question. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
No, I
Paul.
was just going to say along that line, I feel like, ironically, some of my simplest songs are my most popular songs.
Yep. I think listeners like simple, right? Like, they don't wanna think, they wanna feel a song,
Hmm.
because I always think if you make your listener think, you've lost them.
Yeah. You got to feel first.
And you can't bury the lead, as they would say in journalism, right? Like, you kinda
Yeah.
have to get to the point and don't kinda beat around the bush, like, just tell us so we can determine if we are relating or not.
Hmm.
Um, Jeanette says, "Ever written a song based on a conversation, and what was that like?"
I cannot say that I've ever like replicated a conversation in a song, but definitely comments that people have made to me and experiences I've had of inspired songs. I think sometimes those are the most deeply emotional ones. I'm kind of a, it's sort of ironic. I'm sort of a private person. So it's hard for me to like spill my heart out on the stage and make things too public. So sometimes I maybe hide behind metaphors and things like that, which I'm still working on.
Yeah.
Um, but those personal heart wrenching experiences or things that people say can definitely be a stimulus to a good song. I mean, because if you feel it, it can come out in your song that way.
Yeah. Paul, I don't know if you've ever read the Jeff Tweedy, that's his name, right? Jeff Tweedy from Wilco.
Right.
His book, How to Write One Song.
Hmm.
Um, on the Audible version, he actually recorded him and his wife having a conversation, and he took that recording of the conversation and turned it into a song, and he used it almost word by word, like, almost exactly. It was almost just like a transcription, and it turned into such a cool song, and you don't have to, like, secretly record, like, you and your friends to do this, but maybe take, like, a set of dialogue from, like, a scene of a movie off of YouTube or something, and, like, just try to write that to a song. I think conversations are a great place to start because a song is really a conversation between the singer and the listener, and
Yeah.
the singer is really just the actor that's performing the songwriter's work. Sometimes the artist writes their own song, but sometimes, as a songwriter, we're giving the script to that singer to communicate to the other people.
I was just thinking when you were talking about that, it'd be cool to write a song where the first verse was one person talking, and then the
Mhm.
second verse was either the reply to that or just the other person talking. And then you could throw in a bridge or a third verse where they're back and forth a little bit. It kind of be a neat experiment.
Yeah. And I know someone would say that would be a cool duet. You could do it as a duet,
Yeah.
or it doesn't have to be a duet. It can just be from two people's perspective,
Mhm.
which is really cool.
Yeah, or
Um,
what if the first verse was what you say out loud and the second verse is what you think in your head? I mean, there's so many ways you can go with it, right?
exactly. And that's that whole concept that I've talked about in other workshops is you're advancing the perspective, you're advancing the story, and you're recoloring your chorus, right? Like you're taking us deeper into a topic, so your verses aren't saying the same thing all the time. Like I recently did a song critique. So on my website, I do song critiques for people, and somebody had sent me some lyrics, and their first verse was basically saying the same as the second verse, but it was all just different words, right? It's like, yeah, the second verse was different, but at the core of what they were saying, it was all the same thing. And that was some feedback that I gave them. It's like,
Mhm.
we already know this from the first verse. So use the second verse as a chance to take us deeper into the who, the when, the where, the why, like all of these things about the song.
And that is something that I did really poorly for a long time. It's something that I try to focus on all the time now because that is hard, right? I mean,
It
it's
is.
hard to keep thinking about how you can move it along and how you can get to the next step. But you're right, it's key if you want to keep the interest of the listener and if you want to keep it meaningful.
We have another question in the chat. So love the questions. If anybody has any other questions, keep them coming. Love it. Um, how do you think key signature plays a role in how well a song is received?
I think it's important in setting the mood for sure and the feel of the song. If you're writing a sad song, but you're writing with all major chords and a real bright kind of sounding thing, there's a dissonance there, unless that's what you're looking for.
Yep.
Use your minor chords to bring in, those sad tones. Use your major chords to lift things up. Then there's lots of variations in between, but I think particularly the chords you choose, it does make a difference because Chad, you talk about prosody all the time. You've got to match the music to the message, and that's a big part of it.
And when we say the match the music to the message, I always get people saying like, "Well, what if I want to write a sad song that sounds happy?"
Right?
You can, but you have to understand how that's received, right? Like that adds a level of sarcasm
Yeah.
to what you're saying because there's that disconnect between the prosody of the way that that's all work together, which awesome if you want that message to be that way, right? So but I think the key is learning how to use that whole spectrum of tools to deliver whatever emotion that you're trying to convey.
Right. And then being intentional about that. Because, like you said, if
Yep.
that's what you're after, if you're after that sarcasm kind of dissonance sort of a thing, okay,
Yep.
then that's your message in a sense, right?
But I think key signature, that's an interesting question too, because for me, I have what's called synesthesia. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but I see colors when I hear music. So when I hear different keys have a different color to them. So like for me, like the key of B flat is kind of like an autumn brown orange color. Like the key of A for me is like a red color. G is like brown, F is blue. Like all these different keys have different colors. So the key that I choose actually does have an impact on sort of how I
Mm.
experience the music. Other people may not see that or experience that at all, but I think there is a difference in key.
That's cool. And there's a movie like that. What's the movie where the character has synesthesia? Can't remember, but the kid does. He sees music in color, and that's cool because
Yeah.
even if we're not intentionally or aware that it's impacting us that way, I think it does. So I don't have synesthesia. I don't see color, but I definitely feel different depending on the key signature. That's probably a place where my lack of extreme technical expertise in some of those compositional pieces, I'm probably a little bit limited there, or I do it more just intuitively.
But when you think about it, right? Like everything's a wave. So like
Yeah,
different colors of light are
sure.
different frequencies of light waves. Sound has waves too. So like different every note and every key has a different vibrational thing to it. So there is something like in physics that different people might pick up on it. Like I may pick up on that different than like you do, but in the same way, like, and I don't know if you're like this, but I hear a lot of guitar players, they can tell you what another guitar player is playing because they've remembered that tone or those vibrations of how a guitar behaves, and they can know exactly like the inversion that someone's playing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I can't do that.
Right. Well, that's interesting. You talk about the feel of the guitar, because you can actually feel the vibrations in the instrument and such when you're playing. But one of my favorite ways to write is to sit down with my lyric pad and my guitar, and I sort of do it in tandem. But it's like this exploration to find the right key, to find the right chord that feels right with the words that I'm singing. And sometimes it'll change the lyric a little bit. Sometimes it'll change the chord. A lot of times it'll change the chords, and I'll try like 7 or 8 different chord progressions through these lyrics to see what feels best, what sounds best, what seems to fit the
Yeah.
message that I'm using here. It's kind of a little bit trial and error, but to hear it as I'm kind of roughing through the rough vocals, that works for me anyway.
So speaking of process, it's funny. For me, I can write lyrics without music, but almost 9 times out of 10, that lyric, what I just wrote, really becomes a palette that I pick and choose from once I go to the instrument and start actually putting it to music. Like, it's very rare that it stays in the form of the lyric that I originally had. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
and I heard another songwriter, and I don't remember who it was. I think it was a famous songwriter, or maybe it was a Berkeley instructor or something, but they said that you should get to meshing the music and lyrics as soon as possible because they both influence each other. And I
Yeah,
was like, mind blown, because I was always like, I do one and then I do the other. It's either I'm doing music and then the lyrics, or I'm doing lyrics and then the music, right?
right.
But that concept is, as soon as you can possibly start mixing them together, that's where the magic happens. But I don't do it that often because sometimes I'm writing songs while I'm upstairs with my partner watching TV. It's not like I'm sitting there with a piano on my lap. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, and I was reaching up here because I was grabbing my book of poetry that I published a while back, Paper Rafts and Lava Rivers, and
sweet.
sometimes I will grab a poem out of here and try to turn it into a song. And the,
Ah,
the main message kind of stays, I mean, it does stay the same essentially, but I have to throw things out. I have to bring in new things that weren't there before because the structure is different. So
mhm.
um, it's kind of an interesting. So sometimes when I'll perform a song, I'll actually read the poem first that it came from, and then I'll perform the song. And it's sort of the same story, but it's a different experience because they've been repackaged differently.
Well, you and I both took the studio course with Ryan Tedder. I know
Hmm.
that I think we took his first Ryan Tedder course that he did online. And remember him saying, "Don't get addicted to, I think, stupid lyrics or bad lyrics." There was something he said where it's like, "Don't get addicted to bad lyrics." I think that just means be open to changing it if the song needs you to change it, right? Like,
Hmm.
it's not it's because sometimes the song wants to do something that you as the writer don't necessarily want it to do, but
Right.
make the song speak for itself, I think, is the advice.
And I will admit there are some songs that I've recorded, and then I'll play them live, and I'll use different lyrics because I don't like that original choice.
Yeah.
Why not? Right? Let it live.
There's a lot of artists that do that too. Like, that's
Hmm.
fine. Yeah. There's another question in the chat. This is a good one. So it says, "Hello, uh, hey, any advice on making a good arrangement? I struggle a lot with the concept of arrangement so much." So with arrangement, I'm assuming that means like the song structure,
That's
probably.
what I
Like,
was
how do you
wondering.
set up the song structure? Um, Arrangement can also mean instrumentation and stuff too, but and maybe put in the chat to clarify kind of what you mean by arrangement. But what are your thoughts if we say just that question flat out? Where does your mind go, Paul?
I was thinking structure too, like the organization, the verse, chorus, bridge kind of a thing. I think it is perfectly fine to take some of those tried and true formulas and organize your song into that. I mean, if you're just starting, try verse, chorus. You know, just do that. And then maybe you want to try verse, chorus, and add a bridge, and then come back to the chorus. And then maybe you want to add in, you know, in your next try as you're progressing, add a pre-chorus. So you're going verse, pre-chorus, chorus, and try different ones. And you can actually Google and find just tons of different structures for songs, or pick your favorite song and try to emulate that structure. I don't know. What do you think, Chad?
I agree. I think, I have Pat Pattison ringing in my head because I've taken some Pat Pattison courses with Berkeley, and Pat would say, try them all. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
take the same song and write it in different forms. Like, maybe you do a verse, refrain, bridge, verse, refrain, right? Or maybe you do verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. Like, and maybe you do need a pre-chorus. Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't even need a bridge. Like, maybe your song has two verses before the chorus. And then,
Mhm.
I think a lot depends on genre, to be honest. Um, and I 100% agree with you, Paul, is I hear a lot of people talk about they want to try non-traditional song structures. And I think what I hear them saying is they want to be unique and they want to have their own original sound. Personally, I don't think structure is where you accomplish that. I think structure in your song is like the studs in a wall, right? Like, a carpenter doesn't go in and be like, I'm throwing out all of this like years of architectural like practice and best practice, and I'm just going to make my own type of wall. Like, screw you guys. You know what I mean? I think where the original part comes in is the content of a song,
Mhm.
right? So using using the skeleton that works, it works because millions of songs that connect with millions of people use it, like the verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, right? Like, it works. So use that. And I like to think about it as a Christmas tree too, right? Like, use the tree. The tree is that structure, and then decorate it in your own way. So I think it's more about what you're writing about, more so than that overall arrangement, if that makes sense. So I don't think you have to come up with, like you said, Paul, it's like imitation is power when it comes to the actual structure there.
Yeah, I think so. And it takes, okay, in education, we talk about the cognitive load. your brain can only handle so much at one time, so much new information. Well, if you grab a structure that somebody else's, tried and true structure, you're taking that part of the cognitive load off. So now you can focus on lyric, you can focus on melody. You don't have to think about structure on this one. It
Yeah.
frees your creative mind up to do those other things.
Yeah. And I do think listen to songs that move you and write down what they're doing. And even if you don't know what the section is called, just give them a letter. Like, oh, this section, I'm going to call this A, right? And then there's a different section. We'll call that B. Oh, this section sounds different than those two. So that's C, right? And then where do those repeat? And then just make a chart of like what that arrangement looks like. I think that's a good idea too.
And one thing with arrangements too, Chad, and I don't know if you've been noticing this, but it seems like it changes over time as far as like what's the current trend. Like right now, songs are trending short. You
Yes.
know, a lot of songs are under 3 minutes now. It
Yep.
just, I don't know if it's the social media age of shorter attention spans and, things like that, or what it is, but
Yeah.
songs are shorter. There's fewer solos going on. It seems like verses maybe have 4 lines and then you're into the chorus. Not that it has to be that way, but it seems to be a current trend, at least what I'm seeing. I don't know what you're seeing there, Chad.
Oh, definitely. Like some of the new albums that are coming out, there'll be like 12 songs on it and it's like 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Like you can listen to a whole album in like 25 minutes. And for those of us who grew up in the 80s, like me, like I was used to an album being at least a good hour, right? Like and there would be solos and there'd be some music and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think it's the people would say it's the TikTok generation that people's attention
Mhm.
spans don't last that long. And I think we've cut out song intros because people are they lose attention so quickly. They say the average time that someone listens to a song on Spotify is 7 seconds. So if you don't get to something interesting either in the production or the song itself, you're going to lose people. So then they also cut out bridges. So now you've cut out different sections. So that's why the songs are getting shorter. But everything's a pendulum, right? Like they're going to go down to the point where it gets super short, like a minute. And then all of a sudden we're going to go back up to like, we're going to have American Pie. And even Taylor Swift had a 10-minute song.
Right.
And you don't get bored listening to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, Bohemian
Um,
Rhapsody, how long is that? And that's like still super popular airplay.
right. But here's the thing, radio itself doesn't even have the power that it used to have, right? Like the internet has changed so many things.
Yeah.
I think radio is still where songwriters make money, though. So if anybody is trying to be like a professional songwriter and actually make like royalties, like I don't think the internet has caught up unless you become a successful like YouTuber or TikToker.
Yeah.
Like the money's in radio still.
Hmm.
Coco had a follow up question that said, "Where I struggle is how long my intro should be before I start the verse." Um, so I know I just said people will only listen for 7 seconds, but you just have to interest them so they listen past the 7 seconds. But for me personally, and Paul, you can answer this too. I usually do 4 bar intros. Like that feels like a good intro length to me. How about you?
Mine have gotten shorter. Um,
Okay.
I I've gone to 4 or 6 bars now. I used to do like a half a verse,
Mm.
um, or a half a chorus, just to kind of bring in, and maybe I'd bring in the hook of the chorus with some instrumental, just to kind of tease what's coming in the song. But mine have gotten really short in the last year or two, and I've gone pretty quickly into the verse.
I actually have some songs that um I don't have an intro. I literally like it
Mm.
starts like from the get-go, which
Yeah,
is I mean it is its own thing. Um but then I'll do like more of a dancey song. If I do more of a dance song, then I'll have a longer intro because then you want to build some tension with the music and you want the beat to build and like all those things. So some of those things are genre specific and honestly whatever you like, do
yeah,
it.
yeah,
There's
really.
no I mean, and And I think people look at me sometimes because they're like, "Well, you teach all these concepts and these tools and, like, all these things," but it's like, that's all they are is tools. You can use them however you want to. I heard somebody this week say that, like, uh, like let's say, like, a wrench, right? Like, you can use a wrench to fix something, but you could also break a window with it, right? So it's like a tool can be used for good and bad. So it's like you have to figure out how do you want to use each tool in your song. So, and intro length is just a tool.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, I think you were in on the session too. We were listening to somebody from Nashville talk about licensing and what do you call
Oh
that,
yeah.
Chad, when you sell your music
Sync.
for syncing? Thank you.
Yeah.
Sync. And he was talking about, well, people talk about don't have an intro, but sometimes I sell the intro because somebody
Right.
wants this music piece to go underneath something else in a movie or a commercial. Sometimes the intro is what they want. So I love your comment, Chad. Do what you want to do to a certain degree,
Yep.
because that might be what people really connect with too. So I don't think there's a perfect recipe for all of this stuff.
No. And speaking of intros used in sync, so I've licensed some of my music over the years and had some songs that have been used in TV shows and stuff. And there was a song that I had written. It was a co-write with a couple of friends, and we wrote it like at the end of the '90s, but it got picked up in the mid 2000s for a TV show on the We network for a show called Amazing Wedding Cakes. And this was a ballad that had a really long intro. And guess what part of the song that they used while they're cutting the wedding cake? It was the intro. There was no vocal, there was no anything. 37 seconds they used, and we made like 1,800 bucks off of that.
Yeah,
Plus
you
I get
just don't know.
yeah, plus I get BMI royalties ongoing, when it replays. So yeah, you don't know.
So go out there and watch the wedding cake show so Chad gets more royalties.
Well, yeah, definitely. um but that's the thing, like everybody's talking about sync now, and you have to remember that sync songwriting is different than songwriting for like artists to cut, because a song that an artist is cutting is really its own thing, where it's like it's the message of the artist, it's the artist's voice, it's what the artist wants to put out into the world. Which I have a point about that after we talk about this. But so there's that. But then in sync, the whole job of a sync song is not about the song at all. It's about amplifying what's on the screen.
Mhm.
So whatever way it does that, whether it's the music in the intro or if it's some sort of vocal line or whatever, that's there to support whatever visually is there, which is a different animal, I think.
Yeah, it's a soundtrack, right?
Exactly.
I was
So
um, I was speaking with somebody at an open mic a couple of months ago, and he's actually making his living composing mood music that he publishes on YouTube. And
really
people are just using it for background music, and that's where he's making his money.
awesome.
And there's no lyrics, no
No
lyrics.
lyrics, just he's yeah. There are people making tons of money off of playing rain sounds on
Yeah,
YouTube,
yeah, right.
like some of those 24-hour rain sound channels. Like, yeah, it's crazy. This channel just got monetized, so I actually make a
Woohoo!
little tiny bit of money, like 50 cents a day.
All right.
I joke about it, but that's 100% more than I was making before. So it's progress and it's awesome.
Yeah, and if anybody has other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat over there. We love taking your questions.
Yeah, this is fun. And while we're waiting for questions too, I want to promote my merch a little bit, little commercial,
Do it.
the at home songwriter merch. Um, my partner asked, he's like, well, your channel's called At Home Songwriting. Why does it say At Home Songwriter? And I said, "Because I'm showing off that I'm a songwriter. I'm an at-home songwriter. This is my badge. So I want people to, like, wear it with pride and be like, you know, you're an at-home songwriter." There's mugs, T-shirts, hats. But yeah, they look pretty good. They just came yesterday. I just
I
ordered
like
them.
it. I like the play button and stuff under there. That's cool.
Yeah, I wanted I designed it, and I wanted something simple that said, straight to the point, but then also had some kind of, like, that implied music, and I was like, "Oh,
Mhm,
I could put the play symbol thing." So,
mhm.
yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, let us know if you have any other questions. What I was thinking about before, Paul, when we were talking about artists and sync, um, sometimes people think that their song gets rejected by an artist or a publisher because it's not good,
Mhm.
but actually it gets rejected because it doesn't say the right thing. And when I say the right thing, it just means it's not the voice of the artist that would be cutting it,
Yeah,
right? Like, if the artist just got married and they're happy and they just had a new baby, they're not gonna sing the Carrie Underwood before he cheats, right? Like, that doesn't align with their life. So sometimes the reason why songs get passed up has nothing to do with the song. It's just that's not the voice of the artist at that time. And when you're a songwriter and you want to write for other artists, you have to step aside and know that you're writing from the perspective of someone else. Artists a lot of times don't like to just record something that is your perspective. It has to speak to their perspective. Have you seen that, or, like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
it actually makes me think of literature. There's a writer in Minnesota, John Hassler. He sold one of his novels to Robert Redford for movie rights, but Robert Redford never turned it into a movie. And the author's speculation is Robert Redford did not want to look like the sick old man that was the protagonist in the book because that didn't fit
Mm,
his image. And it's kind of like what you're talking about. It's like, that's not the right voice for my character persona that I'm sharing, with the public. And I think of Ryan
right.
Tedder's class that we were in. He would write intentionally with the thought of pitching to certain artists. Well, that shaped how he wrote the song because he would need to write a song that that artist would feel comfortable singing, both vocally, it's in the vocal range of that artist, and topically, it's something
Yeah.
that kind of fits sort of their image.
Right. Right. Um, so we have another question, which is a good question from Coco. Regarding a nice, catchy chorus, is it a good idea to change my chord progression in this section?
Yes. I My opinion, I almost always change the order of the chords when I get to the chorus because you want something to stand out differently. So it should stand out melodically differently, but then the chord is another way that you can change the feel of that section. So musically now they're hearing something different. Oh, we're moving to a new section. Something is changing. Um, you know, the typical example, like for a guitar player, if you're writing G, C, and D, and that's your progression for your verse, G, C, and D, maybe then in the chorus you go C, D, and G. I mean, as simple as
Mhm.
that. Even it just changes. There's thousands of hit songs kind of written with that formula, and I don't know. You're more of the music master there, Chad. What insights do you have on that part of it?
Um, it's always a good idea to have your sections contrast.
Yeah.
So if it's not the chord progression, it has to be other things. Like, if your chord progression stays the same throughout the song, which a lot of modern songs, it's the same chord progression, like, from start to finish. Like, every section has the same chord progression, but you then hear that the melody changes in each section. So if you have longer notes in your verse, you would have shorter notes in your chorus. If it's lower notes in the verse, then you would have higher notes in the chorus. Um, if you can change the chord progression in the chorus, I would say do it. I think Paul's comment of changing the order of chords, that's one way to do it. You can change the frequency of the chords, even if you're doing the same order. Like maybe in your verse, you have it going like one chord per measure. When you get to your chorus, you could maybe do two chords per measure, or one chord for two measures. So change that harmonic momentum between sections. Um, you can also alter the chord. So maybe it's the same progression, but maybe you do a C5 instead of a C major chord, or maybe you do a C major 7 instead of just the C chord. Like you can do all of those things uh, just to add that little bit of contrast. And then Coco says they always wonder how some songs sound so good even when using the same chord progression. Yeah, they sound good because they're contrasting all of the other things, including lyrically. So you'll notice too that the rhyme scheme will contrast. So let's say you have A B A B in your verse, then when you get to your chorus, you might have an AABB, or maybe it's like XXA, XXA, so there's some lines that don't rhyme. It's building in that contrast somehow. And if the chord progression's the same, the contrast isn't coming from that. But even with the same chord progression, you could even play it in a different rhythm. Like maybe on guitar, you're strumming in your verse, whereas like when you get to your chorus, maybe you start picking. So that creates contrast too. So production and performance can vary it too. That's a really good question though, Coco. So thank
It
you.
is. Yeah, production does play a big part in it because a lot of times the chorus will have harmony where the verse did not have harmony, and now that sets it off. Um, for the songwriting challenge, actually, that you prompted, Chad, I've been working on a song for that. I
Cool.
initially started doing what was mentioned and having the same chord progression through the entire song. I thought, well, I'm just going to try that because one of the requirements is this chord progression at some point.
Yeah.
Well, as I got further into it, I realized that my chorus sounded way too much like my verse when I did that. So for me, I had to jolt myself into another section of the song by changing those chords. And that helped me to set that part off from the rest of the song.
Yeah. And honestly, it sometimes does come down to like what works for you as either a singer, because I think your voice does make a difference in how you write, and your instrument can make a difference too. But don't think that you have to be a good singer to write great songs, because honestly, if you're not a great singer, that means that there's a lot of other people out there that are just like you that can still sing along to what you're writing. So that's a good thing. Um, but no, the contrast thing, like contrast and prosody, they beat it into us through Berkeley, like when we study with Berkeley. But I think that was the biggest thing for me when I really started going from just like songwriting the way that I always did. Incorporating contrast and prosody was what changed my songwriting for the better, I think. Really good questions.
Yeah.
Speaking of the challenge that we have going on, or what Paul was talking about, it's the meetup group March Songwriting Challenge, which is the at home songwriting challenge. Started on March 4th. And April 1st, we're going to have a meeting to share the songs that we've written. They have to be in by March 31st, but you can get to the meeting at the meetup page. And then also at athomesongwritingcourses.com, you can get to the community and see like all of the criteria that we have as well. So definitely check it out.
And I would just hop on that, Chad, and encourage people to take part in these kinds of challenges because it really is a great way to not only push yourself to write another song, but hear what other people are doing with the exact same prompt. It's so eye-opening to hear other people's take on the exact same starting point. And it reinforces the fact that there are so many ways to write great songs. It just gives you more tools in your toolkit, more approaches, more references to draw upon when you're writing your next song. It's really a good experience.
And it gives you a deadline. I think,
Yeah.
that helps me because I'm usually the procrastinator that it's like, oh, I can do that later, you know.
Hmm. Deadlines are good.
Have you been writing a lot, Paul? Or
Recent,
what's been your writing like, kind of like from just a frequency standpoint?
I am probably writing more now than I ever have. Taking part in songwriting challenges. Yours, one through Minnesota Association of Songwriters, one through the Singer Songwriter group on Facebook. I'm writing probably a song, at least one song every other week, which for me is quite a bit. And just trying to see what the quantity factor does for my writing. More practice, more things to draw from, and then I'm hoping to go through and pick out the best ones from those to maybe fully produce.
Do you feel like, you held up a stack of CDs, like when you go back and listen to some of your past work,
Hmm.
do you see that you've improved over the years?
Hmm.
Or like what's your take on your experience like that?
It's always interesting. There's some songs that age well, and then there are some songs that's like cringeworthy, when you listen back to them. It's just a natural evolution. Not every song that we write is going to be a masterpiece,
Yeah.
but the ones that have stood the test of time for me, and probably the ones that I continue to play live more, do hold up well. And I learn from that, and I think about, okay, what was it about this song that aged well? What is it about this
Interesting.
song that still today connects with people, even though it connected with them, 15, 20 years ago? There's some elements from that I think I can keep learning from, and I apply to the next one. Plus, I just get more tools in my toolkit.
Yeah. Um, I always think of the Pat Pattison quote too, where he says 90% of what you write won't be your best 10%. And I think that's true. Like most of what we write is not going to be our best. So
Hmm.
we shouldn't lose sleep over if a song's not working. And I just think you shouldn't rewrite a song to death either, because
Right.
not every stone can be polished into a diamond, you know.
There's a song.
There you go. That's a
Write
freebie. That's the, price of
write
admission
it
right
down.
there.
Title, write it down.
Yeah. It'd be
And
called
one
Not
of the
Every
things that
Stone. Someone should write it.
I know, one of the things that Chad and I were talking about before we came on air is just how do you keep your songwriting fresh as you go on? Because I don't know about other songwriters, but sometimes I'll be in the middle of writing a song and I'll be like, "Ah, I've written this song before. This melody is the same as in that song," or you
Yeah.
kind of can get in a rut if everything's always the same. And we were just talking about how one of the things that I will do to try to get out of the rut is do something different in my process. So maybe I start with a different instrument. Even picking a different acoustic guitar off the wall, it ends up with a different song because every instrument has a personality and it draws the song in a certain direction. Or I go electric, or I start with a drum beat that I've never used before. And that's all I have as a stimulus for the song. Something different just to kind of prod me ahead in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm a keyboard guy, so I think I'm not necessarily picking up a different instrument necessarily, but I can change the sounds that I'm using. Um, but I think for people who are maybe not as, if they don't have multiple guitars or they're not a keyboard player, like changing the process of what you start first makes a
Yep.
difference too. Like, are you starting music first? Are you starting lyrics first? Are you sometimes a great way to break out of what you're doing is listen to other genres and try to sort
Mhm.
of imitate a style. Like not stealing what a song is doing and not ripping off another song, but just maybe there's a rhythm or something. Like maybe if you haven't written like a reggae song, maybe you want the boom, meh, meh, meh thing where you're kind of playing on the offbeats and giving it kind of that swing. Um that's something that you can do. I also think learning different chord voicings, like I get stuck playing the same chords in the same way. So like on your instrument, figure out how to play chords like in a different inversion or like different things like that can make a difference too. And I also
Cool.
think for me personally, when songs feel like they sound the same, it's the melody for me.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
that's when I have to go back to crafting the melody more. So literally thinking very purposefully about what is my first motif, and then how do I develop that motif throughout the song. So that's where my songs start to sound the same, but I have literally written the same 7 songs for, like, my entire songwriting life, and I hear it when I listen back to, like, some of my recordings because 'cause I've put out so many, but I'll hear it, it's like, "Ugh, that's the same thing, like, that's 100% Chad, like, that's my sound." But I always think about, like, Taylor Swift sounds like Taylor Swift, maybe that's my thing. Like, maybe it's okay to sound like myself. Um, Coco says, "Sometimes feel guilty going back to the same chords." Yeah, I mean, if you are using the same chords all the time, don't. You know what I mean? Like, you don't and I think people get stuck with like, well, if we're in C, we have to start with a C chord. No, you don't. You can play different modes. Start on a different degree of the scale and make a chord progression from that, you know?
Yeah, put the chords in a different order is the easiest way to start. So if you're comfortable playing those chords, rearrange them. That's a great place to start breaking out of that. And if you're a guitar player, capo it up one, capo it up five. You get a totally different, set of chords that way, even though you can play them the same way, and then you can focus on the melody and the lyrics.
Do you ever change your tuning?
That's something that's on my list, to-do list. I love like how Goo Goo Dolls lead singer does that with some of his stuff. I think it um, opens up new possibilities. I know that Keith Richards started messing around with that with the Rolling Stones, and it gave birth to a whole nother set of songs that were unlocked because of that. It just sounds different. It feels different. You can play it differently. So that's something I want to do. And I also want to learn how to play like slide guitar, because then that would be a
Oh,
different feel.
yep.
Finger picking's different than strumming. All of those things make a difference. And another simple thing to do to inspire something new is find some kind of a drum rhythm or a drum track or rhythmic track, because that sets a feel for what that song can be, and it'll probably push you in a specific direction because of how that feels.
So true. Yeah, like and there's a lot of, sites like Splice,
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of, like, Loop Masters, these different sites where you can download different drum beats and different patterns and stuff, like, that does inspire a different sound because you build off the rhythm, and I think rhythm is something that I think gets forgotten about a lot, especially with acoustic songwriters, is how powerful playing to a beat can make your playing too, because you can't be lazy when you're playing along with a beat.
I'd be curious of your insight onto this comment. I heard a producer talking about how the rhythm track sets your song in a place in time. Like disco had a certain feel to the rhythm track,
Mm,
and for a while, like in the early 2000s, it was the four on the floor, boom, 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 boom. It was a
yep.
steady beat, and now there's lots of claps and snaps. That kind of sets things into this time period. What are your thoughts on that piece?
I think that's true, right? Like, I think there are trends that happen from a style perspective or from a production perspective that do imply a time. Um, claps and snaps, that's almost kind of going away now to where
Yeah,
it's almost getting back to more of like an 80s retro
yeah,
sound a little bit, but it's still kind of like cinematic. It's almost like you're combining cinematic sounds with electronic. Um, and then like you listen to like Miley Cyrus, her song Flowers, and like the way that the vocal is mixed is kind of gritty and it's kind of upfront and like there's like these things that happen and it, we are all influenced by what we hear, right? So people who listen to like music that's current, it's always evolving, right? Like, I think that's what's fun about it is you can kind of evolve with what's happening. I really don't think you should chase it, but, but yeah, I guess I don't know what point I kinda lost my train of thought a little bit on that one, but yeah,
No.
I mean, I think it does. I think it does set a place and time for sure. Like, even like I was talking about, if you do a reggae track,
Yeah.
that puts you in an island feel. Like, that's a different connotation than, a 4 on the floor club beat, you know?
And it's kind of cool because a well-written song should translate in those different kind of formats and different kind of beats. Because, I've heard songs from the 70s redone with a reggae beat and they still work because the song itself was really solid.
We have 2 questions. I'm gonna come back to Jeanette's in just a moment, but, Soul Vixen has advice for someone who doubts themselves and has imposter syndrome for songwriting.
Everybody doubts themselves. I would never feel like an imposter. Um, I'd said earlier in the show that I live my life in beta. I feel like I'm always learning. I'm always evolving. I'm trying to get to the next thing. I'll never get there, but I'm trying to get there. I'm always trying to become a better version of myself than I was the last time I wrote a song. Um, Believe in yourself. You know what? There's so many superstars out there who felt the same way,
Or
you
do
know,
feel the same way. They still
or
feel the
do.
same way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, I have so many things running through my head on this because I experience it. What's coming to my mind, what I wanna tell people is, and I've heard this a lot lately, so I don't know if it's the universe, like, putting this into my mind, but comparison is the thief of joy, is the line that I've heard. So I think sometimes if we get too much into comparing where we're at to our idols or to our people who we look up to, we don't feel like we're worthy of that level. But the deal is we will never sound like the people we look up to because we aren't those people, right? So I think what you said, Paul, is you try to get a little bit better every time you write a song. And I think the key is finding the best version of who you are as a songwriter that nobody else can copy and nobody else can be, and just trying to be the best you that you can by using sort of people as like an example, but not comparison. So, um, yeah, I guess I know the feeling that
Yeah.
they're saying is, the imposter thing where you feel like, am I really this? Like, am I really like, is this really what songwriting is? Or is this really like, am I worthy of this? And it's like, yes, everybody starts from a blank page every time they write a song. And, some people have just done it more.
And I'm just looking at the word imposter syndrome. It kind of sticks out. Imposter implies that you're trying to be somebody else. Be
Hmm.
yourself. You are good enough. You are you, and you have value. You are a beautiful person. You have things to say. You have your own unique ways to say it. If you are yourself and you're true to yourself, it's impossible to be an imposter.
Boom. You dropped that one. That one's good.
I believe that. I
Yeah.
believe that. And I've seen that over the years. I mean, I think when I was younger, I tried to be something else. And at some point in my life, it's like, sorry, I'm me. Take it or leave it. Here I am. The world's a better place that way.
I'm just thinking about, like, for me, myself, I go through periods where I feel like I suck. Like, everything I do
Yeah.
isn't quite what I want it to be. And I've written tons of songs and some of them are really good, but in that moment, none of that matters because I can't get this song to be good, right? And I always have to look at it as, am I trying to make it something that it's not? And am I trying to be something that I'm not? So I think your advice of be yourself, don't try to be something that you're not. Just be whatever you are in that moment, which I think is great.
And if you think about Not that we all aspire to be superstars or something like that, but if you think about a lot of the people that have really made impact in the music world, they were different. They
Yep.
were themselves. They were not trying to be something else. They were something different. And it's because they were true to themselves that really made that impact.
They were themselves and had their own voice, yet they used enough of the structure that works to
Right.
get it out there, right? Because that's where I think when you say be yourself and do whatever you want, it's like, but your listeners aren't used to just
Yeah.
totally random song structure, right? Like you
Right.
still need to learn the tools and how you can apply them to your own music as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Build a new house with the same toolbox.
Right. Or just build the frame and then you can decorate it however you want, right? Like,
There you go. I mean,
um,
in my neighborhood, a lot of the houses are the same blueprint. Yet when you walk into those houses, it feels like a different house
yeah,
because, like you said, they're decorated differently. The personality of that owner now is imprinted on that house in a different way. Same with a song.
yes. Um, Jeanette has a capo question. She has difficult distinguishing chords.
I'm not 100% sure
So I
what
think
that
what she may be
means.
saying, Paul, is like if you're playing a chord and you have a capo on, doesn't
Yeah,
that transpose it? So
it does.
how do you know what chord you're playing if you have a capo? And Jeanette, if that's not right, let me know.
That's what I was wondering too. Yeah, please clarify if that's not it. I sometimes think in terms of the piano, so I like count myself up
Yeah.
notes or keys on the piano. So if I'm capo 3, I have to go up 3 keys on the piano, and that's where I am. Otherwise, there's some plugins or whatever, some add-ons to like a Google Doc thing where it actually will transpose for you. So like if you have the song written out with the chords, you can just choose a different key or a different place and it'll transpose all the chords. Or you can even Google, you can say, if I'm playing what chord is a G capo 3, and you'll get the answer on that. Same shape. Yep. It's just capoed. So like if you capo 2, you're basically taking everything up a whole step in technical terms. Each fret is one key on the keyboard. So
Yeah.
you're just kind of moving up incrementally. Like when I sing pop songs, I can't sing as high as some of those people. So I'll capo 5, which actually lets me drop down 3 because there's 8 steps in a scale, right? So I'll capo 5 takes me down 3 actually. So just different way,
Oh,
or I can sing, 3 half steps lower, and it still works that way. Capoing for me is a place to get my voice in the sweet spot. That's why I use it, and sometimes just so it sounds a little different. I'm not
is
totally worked up on the name of the chords, but you can definitely get some tools that help with that.
yeah. So the capo is really just a transposition tool, basically.
Exactly. Yep.
Um, so that's what you do when you sing "More Than a Feeling."
Yes.
There
Yep. I take it down. My friend cape was up. It just
you
kind of
go.
depends where your voice is. But that's why you see sometimes artists. I have actually seen artists play live with a capo when their recording does not have one. It's like maybe when they recorded it,
Oh.
it was in an uncomfortable range and they could do it for the recording, but it's just not a comfortable place to sing live. So they change it.
Yeah. Who was I there was an artist that I was watching an interview on, like, one of the major talk shows the other day, and they said that they had to transpose their famous song down because they
Yeah.
can't hit the high notes anymore. They can't, and they were an older artist, so their voice wasn't doing what it used to do, so they've had to transpose it.
Yeah. And sometimes when I play a cover song, I will capo it and change it so that it doesn't sound exactly like the recording, because then I won't be
Mm,
compared to that artist quite to the same degree.
there you go.
There is a cool online. This is slightly different, but if you're looking for new chord ideas, Chad, you've got a cool idea about rolling dice, but there's a website called Chord that
Mm,
you just hit scramble and it'll give you a different chord sequence, and it's sometimes a way to break out of a rut too.
That's cool. I heard somebody else in a workshop just brought up chord, and I haven't used that, but that's cool.
Yeah, I learned about it in one of these monthly online songwriting classes. I can't remember which one.
Cool. Um, yeah, if anybody else has any questions, we'll probably hang out for a little bit longer if there's any other things you want to talk about. I do want to let you guys know about stuff that is coming up with at home songwriting. So if you're watching this on YouTube, we have some things going on this coming week. So if you want to, join online workshops where we're actually talking about other topics. I guess there's not one this week, but coming up events wise, Haley Rydell is going to be my guest like this on Thursday night. Haley is a singer and a songwriter who has a new album coming out called Midwestern Daughter. She grew up in a small town. Um, Her new album, I think, is coming out in the next couple of weeks, and she has a really cool style, and like her mission on what she's trying to promote with her music is super cool. So she grew up in a very conservative small town. She is a lesbian, and her album explores like this evolution of the LGBT community through the small town lens and kind of like what that was like growing up. And I'm excited to talk to her too because I think she funded the whole album through like a Kickstarter or like some kind of like crowdfunding thing, which I think will be a super cool thing. So Haley's coming up on Thursday. Next Saturday, Sarah Peterson is going to be here. Um, Sarah's been having some really cool success. She's co-written some songs that have been on Sirius XM radio. She's getting some cuts. She released her own album. She's won some awards, gotten some attention. So she'll be a fun one. And then on March 25th, Doyle Turner is going to be here. So Doyle has been doing a lot of stuff too. So it'll be lots of fun. Soul says, "What's her name?" So coming up Thursday, it's Haley Rydell. She'll be the guest coming up. Sophie has a comment for us, Paul. Says, "Don't have a question, but want to say really enjoyed this and learned a lot." Sweet. Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you for being here.
That's the best compliment ever. So thank you. Also want to let you guys know too, I have a melody writing retreat that's coming up in June. It's actually 3 days. It's a Friday night, Saturday during the day, and then Sunday during the day. It's online, but it's all about melody writing, like basically start to finish. I'm going to share everything that I know about writing melodies. So you'll leave with a ton of ideas, tools, those types of things. So go to athomesongwritingcourses.com and check that out. And registration's only open till May 1st. So there's limited time there as well.
And most of the people that are on this video today probably already are familiar with you, Chad, but I'm going to put in a plug too because I think Chad is a fantastic teacher. He has lots of great insights in songwriting, and I've learned a lot personally from him as well. So big plug for your stuff, Chad. It's top notch.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I love being a student of songwriting and I love sharing this stuff. So this is fun for me. I love it. Yeah. So anything else, Paul, that you want to chat about before we start wrapping up?
Keep writing, keep making music. It makes the world a more beautiful place.
Absolutely. And again, if you want to, join us for other things, athomesongwritingcourses.com is the place to go. Join us for the March Songwriting Challenge, which is going on. We're going to have a meeting on April 1st. Check that out. Join the meetup, check out the courses, get some merch, all that good stuff. So, Paul, it was great to have you joining, and hopefully we can do this again. This was fun.
Yeah, it's fun to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Chad.
And everybody else, thank you so much. If you like this video, hit subscribe, hit like, and then there's other videos on the channel that you should check out too. But have a great rest of the weekend, and we will see you with Haley coming up on March 16th at 7 p.m. Central. So that'll be fun. So, Paul, Have a good rest of the weekend. Don't get snowed in, and we'll see you soon.
You too. Take care, everybody.